going to read it, but I'm going to read it like a pre-digital assistant call center recording system. It's perfect. You guys remember those. Mic check, mic check. You guys ready? Thank you for joining us at the 11th Annual Denver Startup Week. Our title sponsors are Amazon, Capital One Cafe, Dell for Startups, and the Downtown Denver Partnership. This session is part of the developer track sponsored by Quizlet, one of 8 programming tracks aimed at supporting the entire entrepreneurial team. By attending this session, you're agreeing to follow our code of conduct and being photographed as recorded. Please be sure to share your experience using the hashtag Den Startup Week. Placeholder, feel free to add your own hashtag too, and placeholder. That title slide had a bug. It's called foreshadowing. Here are so many more sponsors. And so many more sponsors. And it makes me think of how awesome a job you and all these organizers are doing at wrangling so many people, so many sponsors. And I don't know what part you and crew would all play, but thank you so much for... do you have any ideas? At least one phone call per name on this. Possibly 5. Yes. So very impressive work. So thank you for doing this. The title of this talk is Go Fast, Break Stuff. Actually, you can hear me okay? No. Yeah, okay. The title of this talk is Go Fast. How about right here? Is this good? I don't know what to do with my hands. Okay, cool, perfect. The title of this talk is Go Fast, Break Stuff Will Break Your Startup. Who's heard that saying, like, go fast, break stuff? Yeah, so let's just talk about that for a second. Imagine you're a NASCAR team and the pit crew's like, all right, dude, get in the car. We're going fast. We're breaking stuff. And you're like, wait, aren't you good at your job? Something to think about there. Okay, our path to building unbreakable software. It's the only way I know how to describe what has happened. And I'm kind of have to actually start with a disclaimer. There's like way too much here. There is so much that kind of just to set the stage a little bit about, I've been writing software for 20 some years. And about 3 years ago, Ryan and I, who's back there, met one of the co-signers of the Agile Manifesto and trained under him for a few years. And I literally, it changed everything with how I build software. Like everything. And I don't know how to get it down to one talk. I just don't have the skill set. Like if there was someone who could like mold it into something. So we're going to have to do a little bit different. I'm going to tell the stories that led us up to it and how we got there. And then I'm going to tell a little bit about what we learned. And then I think the best thing to do is to open it up to discussion, because there's so much and I want to know what everyone is interested in, and then we can dig in on anything anybody's interested in. This has been life. But to give you a sense, right, of just the epic amount of knowledge that we've really acquired and applied. So you work 40 hours a week on average. This is Denver Startup Week, so people who work 40 hours a week, we call them amateurs. So let's say 80 hours a week, right? So 80 hours a week, I'm just going to round a little bit. 3 years ago is when we started, and we've been doing 80 hours a week since. So what's that person hours for one person?
12,000.
Okay, so 12,000 hours for one of us we've put into what I'm about to share. It's just to give you a sense of there's just no way to distill it down. Again, someone can do this, just not me. So we're going to do this in 2 steps then. I'm going to tell how we got there, some of the embarrassing stories along the way. If you do not have stories that mirror my stories, then you don't actually build software. And then we're going to open it up for discussion. So let me just set the stage a little bit, and I'm going a little bit more, and I'm going to do it in the context of buggy software, because software's hard and it's mostly buggy. And I'm going to start by going back to the first product-based startup Ryan and I worked at, and that experience up through releasing a mission business critical system for one of the largest beauty retailers on the planet, and what that was like and what we learned along the way, and then we'll transition into some discussion. So the first company I want to start with is called Handbid. Have you guys been to a silent auction where you like write your bid on a piece of paper? And then, well, so what we did, this was 10 years ago, we made it so you could bid on an iPad or on your phone. So, okay, raise your hand if you've ever been embarrassed after a production release because of a bug. If you didn't raise your hand, you don't write software, that's for sure. Okay, how many of you have been embarrassed about a production release where every daily active user was in the same room with you and it was blocking the raising of funds for their children's school? That's where the gray beard comes from. You'd sweat bullets, right? Because we're in the room with people, and it's like a very important thing to them, and things aren't working, and I'm sweating, and Ryan and I are in the back room trying to make things work. And so what ended up happening was we did our first release. It was awful. It was all, I've never been so intensely and immensely embarrassed. And so I said, all right, forget it. We're going to start over. And so we relaunched the product, took a whole year and relaunched the product. It went significantly better because of the way we tested, which is, I think, the way all of us probably test, which is use a thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And then add a new feature. Like, okay, now the feature sends a message. What should I test? Everything. And now we test it over and over. And we never got to the point where we were bug-free, because I think that's an asymptotal goal. I don't think we're ever going to get there. But we got to the point where schools were breaking fundraising records before the fundraiser started. And so we got it working well enough, but just like brute forcing it. Okay, here's a question. Since this is startup week, I was a CTO of this company, and when it was founded. Do you want to go and see the product? Do you want to go in any deeper, or should we keep going? Any preference? I'm going to take the no preferences. Yeah?
I mean, why did you use automated testing?
You are like way jumping ahead in this talk. So this was 10 years ago, right? So I'm like mid upper 20s, and yeah. Okay, so this startup's actually still going. They've done another rebuild since. So right after this, my ex-wife and I opened a place called Spruce. So half barber shop, half clothing store. And the idea was we wanted a place for men to go and just be passengers. So book with a barber, a personal shopper, a photographer, and just go and enjoy it. And before starting Spruce, from the Handbid experience, was like, okay, I need to do something different. Testing and automation hadn't hit me yet. Where I went was architecture. I went, well, how can I build better software? And so I did a significant amount of research on design patterns, on how to architecture software and set it up, and me coding with Ryan's support and DevOps, we built this entire system, almost just the two of us. And it ran thousands of clients a week. It runs, some versions of it are running today, and it requires almost no maintenance. And that's the power of just having done good design patterns. Now, there is still a situation where if I were to add a certain feature, I kind of want to be careful a little bit, and I have to manually test everything. But just by researching like design patterns, I exponentially increased the quality of the code. But still not to the point, like here's what would happen, is someone would walk into the shop, because we had everything in this, right? And so I'm folding clothes, and someone would walk into the shop and be like, hey, there's a bug. And I'd be like, sweet. And I'd pull up my laptop and we'd sit down in the waiting area, and I'd just fix the bug right in front of him. And so here's something interesting to think about. The best time to get a 5-star review on anything you're doing is after you fuck up. I promise you. If you can reframe your mind that when someone goes and complains, is to go, okay, now this is it. This is my 5-star waiting. Because I learned it's You don't have to be perfect, but you got to own your mistakes. And then a lot of times it's really cool to have the people that build the software sit down next to you and be like, okay, what'd you find? Yeah, let's go fix this. And then again, test, test, test. But because we had 100 people coming in a day, or 50 or so a day, we tested quickly, right? So we found things that broke fast, but still having to test each piece of this. Now this was really fun because what we ended up doing is becoming obsessed with I guess in general, how do we make it so when someone walks into Spruce, it feels like they're already logged in? You notice that? Like every time you walk into like your favorite coffee shop or restaurant or whatever, and the person who's working there doesn't know who you are, it's like you're totally logged out. Log back in, and you got to re-upload your profile to that person's brain. It's this process of starting over. And so just got obsessed with building technology that would just feel like you were just walked into a place and picked up your session right where it left off. And ended up to the point where I got, when someone would arrive for their appointment, I'd get their name and a little note sent to my watch as they'd walk in, kind of give me that prompt to be like, oh my God, right, Ryan, how was your trip to Colorado? Like, Holly, man, it's great to see you. How are things been? And it made a big difference. Well, we started to catch some attention. I started giving tours of the shop to Target, Lowe's, Home Depot, lots of big retailers in this idea of like the future of connected retail. Such a cool tagline. Well, then what ended up happening is I was up one night. It was like midnight. I was on Facebook because I'm over 30, and there was a little application for Techstars Retail, and I was like, oh my God, we're tech and we're retail, and so ended up submitting a video for that I want to show you, because the thing about have anybody been through a startup accelerator? Yeah. So you'll know what I mean. It's not about technology. It's about how to run a technology business. And that's like, I didn't expect that, but it makes a lot of sense, right? Like we're there because we built technology, but they're here to help us with the business. And so, but to apply, they said, we want a 60-second video. And the 60-second video's got to show your product, your team, the traction, talk about your vision. And I was like, oh my God, I don't think I could do any of those things. So this is what we ended up submitting to Techstars that got us into the program. Wait, how do we volume? Go. One sec. This, do you think? Now I'll do it through my own speakers. Hold on, I need to agree to more things. Okay, let's see if we got volume now. I believe we do. Hey guys, I know you said 1-minute product video. The problem is we have an entire retail ecosystem. Starts with our internet connected sign. Anytime someone books an appointment, does a little light show. We have our pedestrian tracker. This allows me to draw lines over live video feeds, like the first down line in a football game. Anybody who crosses the line gets tallied. Things to track people as they come into the shop so we can see the ROI on our physical signage. Right? Got our internet connected menu of services. The blue LEDs next to each service is the real-time wait time. All right. Got our totally custom built shoe display with an integrated touch screen. Tap on the shoe that you want, name, vendor, price, size and quantity in stock. Tap the size that you want. Would you like somebody to bring you the size 10 to try on? And it will be done. Everybody then gets a notification on their phone with all the details of the shoe so they can run and grab it for you. We have our missed appointment button. Anytime someone comes in to book an appointment, but we don't have enough people staffed, you hit the button. Then in the back end, we scatter plot that. Now we can get an idea of the days where we're seeing the most business. And I was on the line with Techstars, and they went, what? Like, what's your product? I'm like, dude, you know what I know now. Like, I have no clue. And it was interesting because I come to find out later that, because this was in partnership with Target, come to find out later, Target didn't want us in. They're like, these guys are way too raw. They don't even know how to define their product. And Techstars like, yeah, they don't even know how to define their product. They're in. And so we went into the program, and initially the thought was, let's scale this whole physical experience. Let's scale the whole thing. Let's go in and let's open more locations. Well, so we go to Minneapolis. We're working out of Target's Innovation Headquarters. And I say one of my superpowers is asking for help. So what we did is we just walked downtown Minneapolis and we went into any retail store that looked neat, looked cool, walked right in and went to someone who worked there and said, hey, we're here with a startup program. Is there an owner or a manager? We'd love to talk to them just about business. And we'd work our way up to the owners of all these establishments all throughout Minneapolis. And we'd ask them a lot of questions, but it sounds cooler if I say it this way. We'd ask them one question. What would you do? Would you either continue to run your retail store or would you focus on software? And 100% of them said, don't go into retail. Yeah. And this was like, now at this point, by the time we got all the feedback, it was 2 months into the program. The last month of the program is dedicated to demo day where you're going to pitch investors. So now you have to start working on your pitch it was in the Orchestra Hall in Minneapolis. They got media, they got investors. There's startups up there that are like, we just raised $3 million. We've grown by 200%. And I come up and I'm like, well, so we came in as one company, now we're two. And I couldn't tell anything about, there was no traction, there was nothing. It just literally had enough time to make the decision we're gonna break and then had to start on demo day pitch. And it ended up working out. And so go back to Colorado and Techstars taught us so much. So like, I'm really good at hockey stick graphs in Excel. If you guys really like, if I could help you in any way, I'm so good at the formula. It's this way for you guys, yeah. Well, so here was the idea, right? I was like this, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna find, it's cost of customer acquisition, CAC, and then lifetime value, and then I know how to do the cells, and we're gonna do a hockey stick. We're just gonna go find some answers to these questions, and we're gonna go raise money. And then I got a phone call, and this gentleman was like, hey, I'm representing a client. They're really interested in what you've got. And I was like, all right, that's cool. And I said, their name's is Alta Beauty. And I was like, Aldo? Like, no, Alta. I'm like, Ultra? So I go to Becca, I'm like, have you heard of Alta Beauty? She's like, dude, that's like me going like, have you heard of Android? I'm like, oh shit, I fucked up, didn't I? Well, now I see them everywhere because there's thousands of locations, right? Well, I didn't see them at the time. So they fly some people out, we give them a tour of the store, then when we fly out there, now here's something I've learned. Good software demos itself. And the more you rely on those decks, the more it shows me like you're hiding software. And you hiding software, I don't want it if you're hiding it. And so what we ended up doing, it was Ryan, myself, another co-founder at the time in a horseshoe table with every single executive at Alta and an Apple TV and AirPlay. And I just pulled up the phone, pulled up the system, and just went through it end to end. It took an hour and a half. And so by the time we were done, we got a round of applause. The team looks at us and goes, we want this at Alta. This is what we want. And I said, right on. And then we were already off on the wrong foot. Which brings me to the first lesson. I was gonna have to share a few lessons here before we get into the real stuff because it's gonna be application of these lessons. It's gonna let us hold the line when it comes to writing great software. The first lesson that's actually super important for anybody in anything, but particularly in my experience, is the one true imperative. So the one true imperative is that thing that we're all trying to do, and I'll define imperative as something that's important and urgent. And so what happens if you don't have this one true imperative, people start turning on each other. And you start arguing and churning, and someone needs to be able to say like, yeah, but how does this create a great guest experience? And to be able to draw it back. What I thought the imperative with Alta was to come in and innovate, because I was showing innovation. I was showing things that had not been, this is like 6 years ago. This is stuff that's now very much more commonplace, but at the time, not. And so in my mind, the one true imperative is innovation. We're gonna innovate. But do you know what their one true imperative was? I forgot to ask. That's how easy that is. It's so easy because we went through everything. And I thought we were on the same page, but never went and looped back around and said, just in one sentence, what are we doing? And now I know to ask that question, but I didn't at the time. And here's the thing, if you can't distill down what we're all trying to do down to that one sentence, then the ambiguity that sits in there is gonna cause a lot of problems, which we'll get into later. So we get started. We're off on the wrong foot, but I don't know. It takes me a year and a half to figure it out, but we're going. Now, here's something interesting to think about. Since we're going on two different imperatives, me making the right decision is chance, right? Because I think we're charted a different course. Our course is crossing. It's just chance. Spooky to think about. Well, we start going, and then we hit what is ultimately one of the biggest problems I see, not only in business, but I would say across the board, definitions. If you have not done a definitions exercise with every human being in your life, you're all standing on landmines right now. If you're ever in a meeting and it's going in circles and you don't understand why, either you're saying the same thing and meaning different things, or you're saying different things and meaning the same thing. Both of these fixed by defining words. So here's what happened to us. We're getting started and we're like, we're gonna build an MVP. And Alta's like, we're gonna build an MVP, and no one sought to define it. So I know we have a definition of MVP, and I say that like I'm not applying my lessons. What's the definition of MVP? Minimum viable product. How do you even get there? Well, with a Fortune 500 enterprise, you don't, right? Because MVP for us is like, it's clunky, but it works. Let's get it out and let's see. An MVP for them was. And so you know what we did? Just stopped using the word. We just stopped using it. It just meant nothing, and we couldn't align on the definition. So when we get into things going forward, we're going to take great care to define words, because it's going to be the definition of these words that are also going to help us hold the line when it comes to writing great software. Which, speaking of, let's define great software. I made this definition up, but I like it. Does anybody want to give a shot about how they would define? How would you define great software?
Software that I can hand to a other developer and they can understand it.
I like it. Any other ideas? Bam.
Software that solves a business problem.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
The user doesn't even know it's there.
That's one of my favorites. I love it. You're all wrong. No, it all fits. I've broken it down to 3 bullets that kind of encompass more generally what everybody's just said. 1, people love to use it. 2, developers love to build with it. But 3, the more a developer builds on it, the faster the developer gets and the faster the software gets, which I bet is counter to every single person's experience in scaling software, where instead of what I'm showing here is the more you build, the less people you need. This is very counter to our experience of more bodies. I was listening to Eric Schmidt in an interview talk about hyperscaling Google, and he wanted to meet the engineers behind Google Docs. He's like, this is a cool thing. Send them to my office. He's like, well, we can't. Why not? Send them to a conference room. He's like, no, we can't. Why not? Because there's 150 engineers working on it. And he was like, what? Why? And he postulated that the reason is because engineers have not figured out how to build the right tools for themselves. And he's right. He's absolutely right. And he said, I think AI is going to fix this. And he's wrong. He's absolutely wrong. The answers to this have been around for 20 years. I have no excuse for it taking me this long to learn it, frankly. So this is the one that makes all the difference. And when I start to get into the thing, when we've applied the lessons we're going to go through and the disciplines I want to talk about, I'm going to wait. I don't want to spoil the ending. Okay, that also means we should probably talk about bad software. Okay, so I was listening to these 2 evolutionary biologists talk on the internet because it was quarantine, and what else am I going to do? And they were researching. Have you guys heard the term health span? Different than lifespan, health span, right? It's like, we're not going to live longer, but at least you'll enjoy life as much as possible. And so they're talking about health span, and so they went to this conference. And at this conference, they met a bunch of cancer researchers. And they're like, well, why are we meeting cancer researchers trying to do our research about health span? These are like opposite ends of the spectrum. And then it hit them. Once they started talking, they started to realize the opposite of death is not life. The opposite of death is cancer. And one of nature's ways of ensuring cancer doesn't take over the world is death. And so The same thing happens to institutions. Think about it. You start a company, first generation, everybody there is there for the mission. Chances are, even though you're into the mission, you're not great at hiring or hiring successors. So the next generation of leaders comes in and the quality drops. And then they're probably not as good at hiring as you, and you weren't even good at it. And so the next generation of leadership, the quality drops. And eventually institutions, if they cannot die, turn to cancer. And I invite you to find an institution over 100 years old that you would defend. Same thing with bad software. Bad software is interesting though, because it's information technology and it moves at exponential speeds, it rots really fast. Really, really fast. See? This is the evidence. So, and we're going to revisit this. And it's really important to think about software in an organic way that's living and breathing. And this concept of rot is also very important because you'll see it in anything you let still. If you just don't touch a thing. In nature, it's visible. You can see it. In software, it doesn't hit till your next upgrade cycle. And you're like, no, we're not upgrading anything. Or it's a whole team effort to upgrade one thing. Okay, a few more things, and then I want to start getting into some more technical elements of some of these disciplines. So we're moving, and we're not building great software, but it's working. It's actually working very well. Alta's getting the things that they want. They have the technical experience to make it work, but the whole time I'm not super proud of what we're building. I know it's good. I know that Alta's loving it. Their clients are loving it. We're getting great feedback, but I also know what I'm capable of. You know what I mean? You know what you're all capable of. And it's really hard to release something that doesn't feel as good as the last thing you released. That's really hard. And I can attribute the fact that the software didn't turn out in the way that I wanted to the quality by the next two lessons. This one's going to sound kind of harsh. Don't give the benefit of the doubt. Don't ever give the benefit of the doubt. If you're in a situation and you guys are planning and someone says something and you go, gosh, that doesn't sound right, but I bet they know what they're talking about. So picture this. Picture the landscape of all that you understand about your effort. And then picture over here is that little space where someone that you depend on tells you something and you're like, but I trust them, I guess. You know what I mean? It's okay that I don't understand this. You have just identified where your systems are going to rot. Because if you don't understand it, it means you're not paying attention to it. It means it will rot just like software, just like anything else in nature. And it's this right here that is going to be, for those who manage people who build software, this is a critical one. Because you've worked with someone who's technical or knows a specific subject matter better than you and can get into the weeds enough where you're like, I don't know. I'm not sure what, I guess you must know because the words you're using, I don't understand. And what I've learned in that situation is find someone who's better with words. And don't just, okay, yeah, I trust you. Which is this all going to loop back, I promise. And then, this is ultimately the last lesson, I think. Plan as a team, execute as a team, hold each other accountable as a team. So here's the thing that's interesting. Planning as a team, right? That's easy. You guys fresh out of school, they're like, we made a plan. It is easy. It's fun to make a plan. Do you know what? It's also fun to start on a thing. It's super fun to start on a thing. This is where all these other lessons are going to come in. Because here's what I've observed. And it's the same problem you're facing. He's facing a problem where he wants to increase the, let's say, the quality of the culture of teams. And the only way that you're ever going to be able to really do that is to have a situation where people can hold each other accountable. And I want to hold on that and talk about it a little bit, because as we start digging into more things, this is going to come in, this is going to play a big piece in it. So accountability breaks into a few different ways, and it's not always obvious. The first thing it was like, I don't remember what was happening. My 5-year-old, she did something, and I was like, hey, dude, you know you can't do that. And she's like, yeah, I'm sorry. And then I said, well, and you can't do that because. And she goes, Dad, I know. And I go, hey, dude, I'm just holding you accountable. And holding someone accountable means saying a bunch of shit we already know. And it's weird to repeat things you already know. And you know, and I know you know, but I'm saying it anyway. And it's the weirdness of saying a thing that we already know. And on a good team, on a team that's functioning in a healthy manner, the reminding people of things they already know still kind of feels like, I know this, screw you. But then also, if you're doing a good job of tying it to that imperative, you can go, I knew that. I didn't need it to explain to me, but it's for the mission. And I get it. Still, I'm mad. So, have you guys heard of Lydell, I forgot, Lydell, he's the creator of the iPod. And he talked about working with Steve Jobs. And he broke it down in a really cool way. He said his experience of working with Jobs was not that technically he was an a-hole. And in fact, very far from it. He said there are actually two types of assholes. There's mission-driven and ego-driven. And he said in every one of his experiences, Jobs was mission-driven. There was a period of time where he made insults, but it was really about the mission and what was trying to get done. And when you're in a situation where you're holding someone accountable, at least what helps me is to say, okay, right now I'm just being the mission-driven asshole. Because from the person on the other side, it feels exactly the same. It's indistinguishable from being it hurts, right? It doesn't matter if you know it or you know it's the right thing. Being held accountable is uncomfortable and difficult. Now, there are other ways to do this too that are not as subtle and that are actually, maybe say it the other way, are much more drastic. Okay, so picture this. We're working on this program. We had someone on the team that was breaking protocol. And so our move was to move them into a different place so that protocol wouldn't be broken. The outcome of breaking the protocol was information was going in the wrong order, and so there was confusion. And so what ended up happening is we're like, we've asked, we've laid out the rules, this is not improving. Now I know what I do now, but at the time, we thought, let's just move this person and make sure that we're clear from any disruption. And then here's something interesting that happened. So it was myself, remember I was saying, like when we first started this, I thought we were innovating, and that's not what we were doing. About a year and a half into the Alta project, I ended up convincing some people to come out of retirement and help me, who already sold companies, who are like real seasoned people. And so it was me, Mike, our VP of engineering, and the CEO of the company we acquired along the way. And so these two guys, they're like, we want this person back on the program. And I was like, no, go talk to Mike. And so we all go into a room together. Call this my executive sleepaway camp. So we go back into this room together. We sit down. It's the two of them. It's me and Mike. And they start making the case for why this person should be brought back on. And Mike looks at them and he goes, nope. And we sit there. And they're like, yeah, but then they go at him again and again and again. And he goes, nope. And then we sit there for just what feels like minutes. Nobody's saying a word. And the whole time I'm like, just give them what they want. This is weird. Just give them what they want. But, I'm squirming and then eventually the VP engineering sits up and goes, we tried, and walked out. And it was the first time I'd ever seen accountability take the form of, I don't need to explain this anymore. We're doing it this way because it's what's best, and you're either in or you're out. And this part plays a critical piece, especially when you're trying change management or trying to bring around transformation. It will come to the point where you're like, no, dude, we're writing great software, and if you're not into that, you gotta go. Okay, so I want to tell you about this. So here's what happens. We leave, we release end of 2019, we roll out chain wide, and Ryan and I, we look at each other and we're like, man, just not proud of what we did. Just not proud. It works. It's out. It's impacting the lives of tens of thousands of people. They're liking it. But I know what we can do, and I'm just not feeling good about it. So I did a Google search. I just wrote, how to write bug-free software. I mean, what could go wrong, right? The internet knows. Well, then I found this company, Clean Coder, that gives a bug-free guarantee. And I was like, no way. No way, bug-free guarantee. So, and Ryan, you remember this too, right? Because I'm like, oh, we should go check this guy out. We should go check this guy out. Turns out, so this is Bob Martin, co-signer of the Agile Manifesto. Turns out that there is actually a way with knowledge that's been around for 20 years on how to build great software. And one of the key factors that you touched on was TDD, test-driven development. Who here does TDD? Who here does not? Okay, good, because this is the beginning of the next chapter of your life. So here's what happens. And I try to explain this to non-technical people, why software is the way that it is. And let me know if this is a good analogy. I describe writing software like building something in a massless universe. Everything's light speed, and there's no friction. One line of code's at relativistic speeds. So what happens is you can make a mistake and you can touch something and you can shoot something else off to outer space immediately. And that's how you end up in this situation where one thing breaks another thing. And so what Bob said was, no, try something different. Actually try it backwards. Are you familiar with TDD by the 3 laws? You are familiar with it? Those 3 laws? Okay. Yeah, so here's what makes this TDD different than any TDD that I've ever seen before. The first rule is what, Ryan? Can you remember? Yeah, we'll look it up. So essentially, here's what happens. You write the test before you write the code that makes the test work. So what ends up happening is twofold. 1, you know the test works. 2, once you make the code to make the test pass, you can never deploy it broken again. So here's what ends up happening as an outcome. Ryan and I have a saying, don't build what you can't maintain. Because if you outbuild yourself, you end up in this mess where you're just always trying to keep up. And so what was the first law?
Write production code only to pass a failing unit test.
So you don't jump in and just start writing code. You don't do it. And then the first one is only write as much of a test as required to fail. And then the other one is only write as much production code as needed to pass. It's super interesting. And for those of you who are not doing it, TDD by the 3 laws, I would literally go and watch. There's enough training material available. So here, let me take you through some of the outcomes of this, and then I want to just talk about it. Let's do this. So yeah, that makes sense. I double screened it. Bam. Okay. So this was just a little test that Ryan and I did here. So check this out. We've been experimenting with, what do you guys, Atlassian or Rally or some other thing that makes you want to die slowly, painfully, which is still less painful than using the software. Well, so here's what we did. Instead of doing any fancy management software, we just said, let's tie the code to a cell. Let's write out the behaviors just like a business analyst would. And then let's, instead of going in and manually updating tasks and moving cards around, let's just have the code turn the cell green. Now here's something else that's interesting that's happening. No developer is going in and updating anything. So Mike, do you know what he does, Holly? He just goes right into the spreadsheet. He knows where everything is to the second. Here's something else interesting. Because of the way this is done, we can deploy to production within an hour, anytime, any day, anywhere. Now Bob, he says he can deploy to production in 5 minutes at any time, anywhere. I'm not that good. But here's some other interesting things, right? Because I know a new thing won't break an old thing, it unlocked some cool things to help us fight rot. So Ryan, how many times do we deploy? How many times do we deploy a day to production?
It depends. But yesterday we did 25,
25. How about the day before that?
62.
To production. How many, let's see, how many modules do we have?
We have 20 repos that are 27 NPM packages and then 28 skills.
Okay, so like 40 some altogether. So what we do, we were in this situation where we go, oh my God, like we can keep building and keep maintaining, and we don't need to bring on people just to support legacy anymore. It just continues and it just works. So Ryan was like, okay, what if we did some like auto upgrade thing? Let's just upgrade all third-party dependencies. I'm like, all right, well, let's try it. So now across all 40 some modules, we upgrade third-party dependencies across all of them every 2 hours. Meaning literally nothing in production except for Globby, because F them, is older than 2 hours old. So think about this. There's a production outage. Everybody's scrambling. What would you rather be the case? The code is 2 hours old or 2 years old? One of those is rotted. And now, by doing it this way, we are constantly refreshing the foundation, which means that we can add new features, and not have to take into consideration how we technically support them. And so imagine this. Imagine never, ever having to worry about a thing you already made work. Imagine never having to tell someone on your team, like, all right, just start testing from the beginning. And what happens is you start to gain a type of momentum that is impossible. It is impossible to move as fast as we're moving without having the checks that are in place to ensure that nothing breaks that I've already written. And because one of the pushbacks we get is, well, nobody's got time for this. Nobody's got time for this. If you guys, whenever you're bored, if you pull up adventure.spruce.bot, this is the app that's there. And the time it took for every behavior and every feature and everything that it does. And you can see the time frames we're talking about. Now, here's what's interesting. We only have to really test them one time to make sure make sure the test is not a lie. You know what I mean? You gotta go through and like at least make sure that. What you're not seeing here, because it doesn't exist, that you also would not see in any other management software, are the minutes, hours, or days of work that happens after the developer's done, but before it goes to production. So let's say I could have done this line 22 in 3 minutes without testing. But now no one has to go regression test it again or again. So over the course of the lifetime of the software, the amount of time I'm spending on any feature is actually exponentially less than what it is had we done it the old way. Now, this is where, like I was saying, there's so much content, and I super am happy that there's so many people here TDDing, and TDD by the 3 laws. What I would love to do now is kind of open up a little bit for discussion to push on some of this, especially from the guys that aren't doing it, because I think about what it took me to be open to this, right? It took like a really big life-altering thing for me to go, okay, I'm gonna go back to the drawing board. And when I go and I talk to people about this, I get all the reasons it can't happen, which all those previous lessons will come into play. But I'm wondering now, given that there's so much content and so much to go through, if anybody's got either something they want to dig in on or an experience, I'd love to hear too about the TDD that you guys are doing now and anything else, and we can really dig in on anything. And then even talk strategy on how to, because a lot of the things that I'm facing in pushback are thematically the same as what you're facing too. So I'm wondering, yeah, go ahead. Yes. Okay. So here's a way to think about it. inputs and outputs. So here's how we tested a semantic model. Is I built the tests to send, all I wanted to do was know if somebody was responding positively to a joke, right? That's all I wanted. So what we did is we built the wrapper around the model so we could swap it out, right? And then we coded it for inputs. If I send ha 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 ha, the output has to be sentiment is positive. And so then what we did is we wrote all these tests for what we wanted the AI to say. To do the analysis, yeah. I'm doing Hugging Tree. Have you been to Hugging Tree? Check out Hugging Tree because they've got a lot of cool things you can just leverage. And so here's something interesting that happened though. Because we didn't own the API, it started failing tests. So here you have a choice. Do you just like, okay, let's just not write the test. Okay, so a bad AI model goes out, right? If it's failing tests, it's gonna fail in production. And we couldn't get this, we'd send like LOL and it would be like negative. I'm like, no. And again, I don't control the model. So we ended up, I think, did we keep the joke? Oh, do you know what I ended up doing? I ended up just going in, stripping out the model that we were running against and writing my own dumb algorithm that ensured the test pass. So it was just as good. Now, certainly a properly trained model and someone owning it could have made it infinitely better. We just didn't have the skill. Don't have the talent in-house. But we do know it has to work at least this good. And by blocking it, if it didn't work at least that good, we ensured that it went out and it worked, or if it didn't work, it did not go out. So think of it as inputs, outputs, not going in and testing, let's say, the route, the network path, or anything like that. No, this is great. I'm going to pull up the skill.
But in testing this, did you just use a large, like, million phrases database and ran it through, or were you like just kind of edge casing based on?
Yeah, I was very much, I wouldn't even say education, I was happy pathing on how I test. And here's why. My definition of MVP has something about just be like 8% there. And so that was what was acceptable here. So let me go and let me show you some of this, how we did. And man, maybe, Rye, do you know, did we actually just end up commenting out the test? We're gonna find out.
Still there.
Okay, perfect. No. Mirror. That's not mirror. Yeah. Oh, God, okay. There we go. Perfect. Bam. Oh, wait, so check this out. Oh, so here's something interesting too. So I'm just going to share stuff along the way. A lot of times when you're building software, you end up setting up things in a way where you're like, here are my utilities, here are my, that would be like opening up the hood of an engine and the person who made the engine going, well, here are all the pistons, here's the axle, and you're like, wait, but don't these things all work together? Why are they spread in this weird way? And so when you start really architecting software, oh look. So when you start architecting software, you start in a situation, or you start like this, watch. Let me give you a more complicated skill. So look at this. Here are my behavioral tests. We heard the idea of behavioral driven development. So the way that came about is Kent Beck, who really pioneered the 3 laws, was saying, think about it as behaviors. And someone went, behavior driven development. I was like, no, I'm just saying PDB, just think about behavior. Like, yeah. So like, what I found was a lot of common frameworks and methodologies were like picked from what is, I would say, the foundation of Agile, and then shot off into tracks that I think are mostly distracting. But look at this. The behavioral test. This is a form. There's completing, creating, deleting, getting, importing, reviewing, the root, sending reminders, updating. And so what happens is my utilities, my schemas, my everything goes into there. So what effectively happens is it isolates all these behaviors, and I can't break one thing as easily by changing another thing. So let me show you this. So this is all it is. This analyzer is just a wrapper that does whatever I want it to, right? I just wanted to extract extract an interface, not extract, abstract an interface that was universal. And all I really want to do is just send it the phrase and then give me a positive or give me a negative. And this worked for a really long time until it started failing all of our tests. And come to find out that it just couldn't, it'd just be the weirdest thing, right? Like, so lame would come in as positive. And like, and it's, so gave up using the AI, using that model, that Hugging Face, and just hard coded it.
Question. So whenever you make an inference call to a model, it gives back the answer plus confidence level as to what it thinks is. So why didn't you just check the confidence level if it's less than 70%, right?
I did.
And, yeah, that's
So I love that you asked that question. Now think about it like this. Once the test's in place, I can do anything I want in here. And I can fiddle with it and I can play with it. So if I had the Hugging Face implementation, I'd show you I did that exact same thing. I'm like, well, what if it's this amount of confidence? What if and I just kept building out this algorithm around how to interpret their results, where it's like, man, I just need someone who knows how to train this thing. I'm just going to write something. So we, by doing it this way, gave us that flexibility, and the model was bad. Yeah. Or yeah, you had it.
Yeah, so it seems like a more general problem in my much more limited experience with this kind of model. There's this whole issue of always updating your dependencies every 2 hours. You can very easily run into a dependency that is just not as solid.
Boom.
So,
I can tell you which companies build them.
yeah.
Try not to use anything from Facebook.
Yep.
Minimize that right now.
Right, but when that happens, you have all of these automated processes.
Yep.
You surely have some
Yep.
way of recruiting back.
Or Ryan talked about it. Yeah. So he's we call it the machine.
Yes. So what happens is when they change those and things break, I go take a look at it and decide are we heading forward or not. Since the tests are also going to break, we don't have to worry about sneaking onto production, but we can also catch a change that happened that was not majored properly or following SIMVER. We catch that very early. And so we can actually get ahead of it before we have an outage. And then you go to redeploy for some reason, it brings in a different package, and now you're in a really bad shape. So the tests actually guard us against it. And we run into it about twice a month. We'll have something where an outside dependency does some jump, and then we have to go address it. It's like, do we have to stay back in the old one, which is not what we want to do? Or do we adapt to work with the new one? So
You do that as a manual step before you do the deployment.
no, so as long as test pass, we deploy. So yeah, so if it fails, I hop in there, look at the code, adjust as necessary,
Read the
finish
change
pushing
logs.
it, let it go back through the test. Once that passes, it goes out.
Now tell them about Globby though. This happens too.
So with our current stack that we use, when people go to pure ESM like Globby did, that snuck through, and for some reason none of the tests directly used Globby, because that's actually used as part of our boot. And so we didn't catch it. Code rolled out, started to boot, crashed, caused a big emergency, immediately roll back, look into it, panic stricken, and then so on, those kind of things. It's like, oh, okay, you made a decision for everybody with your latest major. And
Thank
so now we have to pin this one back at version 11 so that we can continue to use it. But that also makes that a strong candidate for someday when we have time, maybe we should replace that piece. So, because that's something that has rotted.
Yeah, actually, watch this. Look at these are our production dependencies. Because now I just don't really want to use code that's not tested. I just don't even want to do it. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to have to make excuses for people. And so what we did is built these tools in a way that these are all tested end to end, and they guard us from as many third-party dependencies as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point that I've had to instill in a lot of my teams, which is you can test a payload coming from their API as it sits today. Does it work or not? Because guess who decided to change an integer to a string value? Middle of the day for no explanation. Salesforce. No there. shove it into my test and go, yeah, that's broken, but it's not me, it's them. So then I can, respond to what they're, because obviously I'm not calling Salesforce up and going, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's same principle applied. It's like, you're insulating yourself from their shenanigans.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Makes triage so much faster.
This is gonna become a form between, what is the best methodology for building a test within the field?
Just straight units.
Not familiar.
What, those test cases?
Right, but there's, inside the code, there are tests that are being built in, like kind of like.
Oh, yeah,
Right?
Yeah. You want me to take you through a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do one. Let's take a look at. Let's see. Not joke. Hold on. Do it here. So these tests are what we're tying to the spreadsheet. And essentially, I'll walk you through this one. Declining to cancel your event does not emit the event to cancel. So I'm faking the cancel API. So we started off making live API calls in all of our tests. We eventually had to go and curtail that entirely. So our tests went from minutes to milliseconds when we did that. But it was cool because what we were able to do, because we were moving fast, is we wrote all the tests making real API calls, and then later came in, closed off all the boundaries, did a loop back system, and then bam, everything went 100x speed improvement, and I didn't have to touch any tests. So we're faking the cancel, and all I'm checking is if it was hit. I'm clicking cancel and asserting that a confirmation pops up. I'm declining the confirmation. I'm just making sure was hit is false. And then no matter what I change anywhere else, like this, let's make it fail. Handle click, I'm gonna get rid of that, save. So, bam, that's it. And it's checking every piece of code I've ever written, every piece of code I write. So I'm not in that. The longer you go, sometimes I end up having to be like, I'm going to come back to that later. But the farther you go for addressing those past broken things, the more difficult that they are. And by having this system in place, you can see how it builds confidence. Because I'm like, all right, what's next? Let's add a new thing. And then you do break other things. But the thing is you're catching it. So I'll go in here. I'll undo. I'll save. Going to run that file, find that it passes. It's going to pop back up to the whole system, and it's going to run everything. And then there's a little issue in the renderer here, but yeah. So this is a small scale, 96 tests. But again, if when you get a chance, actually, let me just show you here. One sec. So let me take you through how much can get built that it just doesn't look like it. All right, cancel. I can't make it. Are you sure? Yes. This is. Let me do demo. Hold on. Cancel. Yes. Post your next adventure. Okay, so when Eric Schmidt was talking about the 150 engineers and how what he thinks is happening is developers are building tools that are addressing the wrong thing. So picture this. How long would it take to build an app if all you were focused on were the microservices? I mean, it's way too small of steps. You know what I mean? So if you're building microservices out to build an app, you're gonna be building for a really long time. And so what we've done here in our tools is we've abstracted one or a few levels above those microservices to allow us to build out interactions like this. Let me show you. So this is called the postcard. Look. It renders a form. It renders a what, when, and where. Submitting it confirms. Fill out form, submit, and accept. Passes the expected payload. And just those 3 tests. Now, you're not just banging the tests out. You got to watch the training on how to write these because these tests are built in many steps. But just those 3 tests, let me take you through what that looks like. So in 3 tests, I can do the whole onboarding of a new adventure and land us right at a dashboard. So I built this to help me do last minute play dates with take my girls places. And I don't know for the dads out there, if you guys are good at preemptively planning play dates. That's not a thing I was taught as a kid. So I wanted a thing where I could just post we're going on an adventure, have it send to all the other dads that I've invited, and then people can just say I'm in or not. And I think, yes, it's almost done too. So check this out too. Look at this. It's not there. I wanted it done for this. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 tests left. And that's all around the messaging and other things. But because we've built the tools at the right level of abstraction, I'm not going, you notice there was no data pool, is because the front end is faking all of its requests, the back end person can start on the back end after. And what that does is means the back end person doesn't build one thing that's not needed. Unless you guys like building code no one uses, that's totally cool too. A lot of my life was spent building code, writing code no one uses. And this has done magic to ensuring that, no, this whole front end experience was built before I did any of the back end work. And then I was like, this is how I want it to behave. Then I went in and did the back end work. So again, the power is in the level of abstraction of the tools. And here are like little helpers. Fill out the form with random values, submit and confirm. Mic check. Who is that? There was a bug.
I'll take advantage of the interruption. What test framework libraries are you using for this? Because your tests are a lot faster than mine.
Yes, okay, wrote a lot of our own. But we are using Jest as the runner under the hood. So what we ended up doing was running Jest, building a custom reporter, feeding in the JSON into this, and getting rid of as much of Jest as possible. We use React as the layer on the front end, did the same thing, deconstructed React. Oh, I hate React, it's awful. But it works, because Facebook. No, seriously, the amount of trouble we've had, we know, because given our testing, right, we know when people push things that are broken before they do. So I'll wake up in the...
Hello.
Mic check. So we know when people are pushing broken things before they do, which is helpful and also frustrating, because what do, right? Salesforce makes a change, you're just like, here we are. I don't know anybody at Facebook.
They take your phone call.
Yeah, it's the tech support line at Facebook. Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody want to go anywhere else? So you had not heard of the 3 laws?
Oh, no, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. I started writing tests about 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I was lucky enough to be a part of the pilot program for an organization I was working with. And back when frameworks really didn't work and mocking was a joke, looking at you, Rhino Mox. But all this stuff works now. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's so much nicer. Yeah, the evolution of it has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Okay, I want to hear a pushback. Do you have, what is something that you can apply from the pushback you're getting? Why would we want to do this? Why? What are we fixing?
A pushback specifically for like the TDD world?
Or just in something that you're facing too? Because I think it thematically will be the same.
Again, thematically, the biggest pushback we're getting about, like one of the things that I promote is engineers should be emotional.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
And if you don't like actually have good emotional sense and you're actually not, or in, what's the word, emotional acumen, then you're going to have those breaks when you feel emotions. Like passion is an emotion. You can't be passionate about your job if you don't feel emotions. And they're like, no, you're wrong. I can be passionate and I can turn off all those bad emotions. Hear that all
Well,
the time.
here's how you can tell them that their software has a bug in it. I've heard of like engineers getting mad that you find a bug. And it's like, well, I don't understand. Firstly, you're mad because you're bad at your job? You're mad at me? You're not, I don't know, this is really weird. Yeah, so, okay, I think we're probably, what are we, coming up on time? We're way over time. Yeah, sorry, thank you guys. This is real early, real raw. This will eventually get whittled down to something that's an hour and concise and actually fun.
That was fun.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? No. All right. Yo, yeah.
What's the best way to, like, let's say you have developers and they need to write some piece of functionality for that kind of thing. They don't know how to write a test for it, or they don't know how to write a test quickly for it, or they don't know how to write a test that can run.
Yeah.
That can like, hey, I don't just have to, it's easy to sell. You take twice as long to write a feature because you have to write tests for it, but then you don't have to maintain it.
Yeah.
It's hard to sell. It's going to take 20 times as long to write this feature because we have to figure out how to write it.
Yes. And my observation has been when someone is competent at tests, that situation doesn't really arise. And it's taken, now I'm to the point where how to write tests, regardless of the complexity, comes kind of intuitively. I would say if you're in a situation where what people are saying is this is exploded or this is too big, I would say go do more training. Go dig in more. Watch Bob, watch Kent Beck. Kent Beck, he's the guy that kind of came up with this. He is really interesting. He goes, one of my observations in life is if you can go and find a process, but then approach it in a way nobody would ever think about approaching it. And most of the time it won't do anything. But every now and again, you'll approach a thing and go, I'm going to do this in a way no one would have thought of, and it works. And it's with those that work that you end up with the $1 million idea. And so what he did is he was like, well, I wonder what will happen if I write a broken test first. And then he started sharing with his friends, like, oh my God, it's actually working. Well, so another thing that he does that could really help anybody hone their disciplines is this code commit revert, where if a test fails, it reverts to your last commit. Have you ever watched him do it? It's like stressful. It's like as soon as he hits saves, if it fails, the test goes back to the last commit. But now he's committing every passing test, which means he's 3 to 5 minutes away from a production release at any time. And it's that going through those types of different disciplines, and there's you guys like in martial arts, the disciplines or the kata based martial arts, right? You have different katas and different forms. There are katas and exercises in TDD that when we spoke with Bob and his son, the way that they do hiring at their company is they make, no matter how experienced you are, you have to intern for a year. And every morning and every afternoon you have to do a kata. You literally have to build an app you're going to throw away twice a day for a year. Oh my gosh, you'd know the answer to that question by then. So it's been my observation from watching people who are good at this that there's no situation where testing is too hard. It's only knowing the disciplines, and the best way I know how to do that are the katas and test and just running through it repeatedly. So, yeah. I was like, wait, I know you. You're raising your hand? Okay. All right. You guys can get out of here then. Yeah, thank you.